Honkai Star Rail is heading back to the Xianzhou Lufu, and this time we're getting some cool new characters. Yunli and Jiaoqiu, yes I probably butchered that, will be our next couple of banner limited characters. But how good are they? Are they worth pulling? What about as a free-to-play player? Let's answer these questions and more as we preview them. Grab yourself a nice bottle of Soul Glad and let's do this. In order to give these characters a good look, let's briefly discuss everything that has been revealed for their kits. Let's start with Better Clara, aka Yunli. Yunli is a 5-star physical unit following the path of destruction. Like Clara, they're both children and choose to not wear any shoes. Anyway, starting with the basic attack, it will just simply do physical damage to a single enemy. Yunli's talent is called Flash Forge, and when she's attacked by an enemy target, she will additionally regenerate energy and launch a counter at the attacker, dealing physical damage. Note that this is a blast move, so it will do a certain percentage of physical damage to adjacent targets. However, if there are no targets that can be countered, the counter will be launched against a random target. She also has a major trace called True Sunder. When launching a counter, she will increase her attack for 1 turn. Yunli's skill is called Bladeborn Quake. First, she'll restore a certain amount of HP, and then in true blast fashion, she will deal physical damage to a single enemy and a certain percentage to adjacent targets. The bulk of her kit is going to come from the ultimate, Earthbind Ether Break. Yunli gains a parry state and taunts all enemies, lasting until the end of the next turn of an ally or the enemy. Plus, it'll increase the crit damage of her next counter. When she does use the counter in this parry state, she will activate Counter Intuit Cole. While both versions of the counter are blast damage, Cole is when she takes out that massive sword and slams it on the enemy, additionally dealing multiple instances of damage, which will be random physical damage to an enemy target. Yunli also has 2 major traces that are very important for this ultimate. Fiery Wheel says that each time the lower version of the counter Intuit Slash is used, the next time will be that full Cole version. The second one is called Demon Quell, and while in the parry state, she will resist crowd control debuffs and reduce received damage. The last part of her kit is the technique Posterior Precedence. She will gain an effect called Ward. When entering combat by attacking enemies or being attacked, she will immediately do the Intuit Cole, the big sword move, on a random enemy target and increase the damage dealt by that attack. Basically, what we can see from her kit is a good bit of self-sustain with that skill. However, we can also see the direct comparisons to the other physical destruction kid. But why are they all children anyway? Yunli has that direct taunt and wants to get hit by the enemy so she can pump out that counter damage. The big difference though seems to be that she'll have a lot more damage than Clara, but then again she also doesn't have a giant robot shooting a bunch of cool lasers. But before we talk about her from a meta standpoint and how she'll fit into Honkai Star Rail, let's now talk about Jiaoqiu. He is of course our second half banner of the 2.4 patch, a 5-star fire character following the path of nihility. Hoyoverse says he is in fact a healer through miraculous food as a chef, so naturally he throws spices at the enemies. A debuff called Ashen Roast will be the primary focus around his kit. Based on his talent, this will raise the damage enemies take per stack of Ashen Roast. Basic attack, of course, is basic. We already know all that. Like Yunli, he also has a blast skill. This will deal fire damage and has a chance to apply a stack of Ashen Roast to the enemies. Here's where things get interesting. His ultimate will match every enemy target's Ashen Roast stack number to the highest number on the field. So if one enemy has 5 and the others have 2, the lower ones will go back up to 5. In addition, a field will activate and he will deal more fire damage. This field will also increase ultimate damage from all allies, and when enemies take action, they have a chance of receiving a stack of Ashen Roast. Jiaoqiu's technique creates a dimension. When entering combat, he will apply Ashen Roast to all enemies and deal fire damage. Briefly going over his talent again will be that Ashen Roast whenever he uses basic attack skill or ultimates to hit the enemy, and those stacks will of course increase the damage that enemies receive. The big thing with Jiaoqiu will be the amount of turns everything lasts and how much damage we can actually deal onto these roast targets. Since that is the primary focus of his kit, that's going to be the most important thing to learn. And of course we'll figure out more and more as the time goes on and we get those traces and damage numbers, etc. Just focus on maximizing that uptime with the Ashen Roast and getting those stacks, and we'll see that great boost, especially to certain Nihility teams featuring a certain Acheron. One more big thing to discuss before we hop into the meta is of course the banner value that each of these units has. Yunli's has Hanya, Yukong, and Lynx as the available 4 stars. Also, as I'm recording this audio right now, I apologize in advance if I call them S ranks. I've been playing a ton of Zenless Zone Zero in case you haven't been noticing. Anyway, all of those 4 stars are very solid options for lots of different account needs. Hanya and Yukong are both very solid Harmony units for lots of different teams. In Hanya's case, we of course have that nice attack boost, speed boost, and damage dealt increasing from her talents and ultimates and things like that. She also has that burden debuff she can apply to enemies that gives us an extra skill point after a couple of hits. Similarly, Yukong also has a massive attack boost, but also crit rate and crit damage if you use her skills and ultimates correctly. While they both have their certain teams that they'll do better in, like Yukong's imaginary team, they're both pretty universal and can be used in a lot of different compositions. But from a free-to-play standpoint, they're not even the best 4-star on the banner. Lynx is a fantastic healer and by far is my most currently used character, especially since I was thankfully finally able to not use Bailu and everything. Especially at her higher Eidolons though, she gets even more exceptional. She has a built-in cleanse, especially with recharge ropes and stuff like that. Also, I'm pretty sure Lynx is my fastest character I have right now, and she's insanely SP positive and able to crank out those ultimates really quick. Naturally, she also has a pretty good heal skill and is fairly easy to build. With her being one of the most universal healers in the game, especially being so good as a free-to-play unit, she has insane value in this banner. But don't forget about her insanely good light cone that we finally have the information for. Dance at Sunset gives an effect called Deeply Engrossed. This greatly increases the odds that the wearer will be attacked and increases crit damage by 36%. After the wearer uses their ultimate though, they receive a stack of Fire Dance which can last for 2 turns and up to 2 stacks. Each stack of Fire Dance increases the damage dealt by a follow-up attack from the wearer by 36%. In other words, as long as the wearer uses their ultimate, they can have an up to 72% damage boost to their follow-up attack. Now imagine this on Clara, Blade, or of course Yunli. The 3 4-star cones on the banner are the Moles Welcome You, Perfect Timing, and the Birth of the Self. I'll put their little blurbs of what they do here on the screen while we talk about it. Really, these cones aren't too bad and they make for a fairly solid overall banner. In fact, I'm still using an S5 Birth of the Self on one of my Erudition characters because I seem to have a huge lack of those. But sadly, Jiaoqiu's banner pales in comparison in every way. I guess being on the B side of the banner is just kind of a curse in this regard because it always seems like they pale compared to the A side. Hook, Guinaifen, and Arlen are the 4 stars here. Hook and Arlen are sadly not very special. I mean, I used Hook a lot during my initial story playthrough and she served me well and I like her design. However, for any of the endgame content, her and Arlen are simply just completely outmatched. Of course, this isn't to say they can't finish it, but it will take significantly more building and effort than a lot of characters even in the same category. Guinaifen is the best option here, as she is a solid choice in most Nihility teams. While she's still obviously outclassed by those 5 stars in Nihility, she is still quite usable, especially at those higher Eidolons. Sadly though, I personally don't think that just her being on the banner is enough to pull it from the shambles that it's in. Oddly enough though, his light cone banner is actually better than Yunli's in my opinion. However, that isn't to discount Yunli's light cone because that thing is insane and will most likely be better than Jiaoqiu's. The 3 4-star cones are the new one featuring March 7th on the cover, Eyes of the Prey, and Secret Vow. As of the time of recording this video, Poised to Bloom is that new one and we don't really know what it does yet. However, Eyes of the Prey is a very good Nihility cone, and I'm using that as S5 on my Black Swan. Secret Vow is also pretty good in its own right. I'm currently using it as a budget option on Blade, mostly because my S3 something irreplaceable is on Imbibitor Lunae. And yes, I don't know why the game wants to give me so many copies of that. In the coming weeks, we'll know more about what Poised to Bloom and Jiaoqiu's Light Cone do respectively, but you really don't have to feel bad about pulling on this banner because it's pretty solid for the light cones. Alright, by now you're definitely thinking, Mogul, stop stalling, we need to get to the good stuff. That's right, it's finally time to talk about who you should be more concerned with pulling and how they fare in the endgame between Yunli and Jiaoqiu. We'll also note this from a free-to-play standpoint, and I do think there's a clear answer. Of course, when we discuss endgame, we are primarily talking about Pure Fiction, Apocalyptic Shadow, and Memory of Chaos. In the future, we could also expand this to cover Divergent and Simulated Universe, so let me know in the comments if you think so. But let's start with a general picture. Between the two characters, Yunli is going to be more universal in the endgame modes and as a free-to-play player. This of course boils down to a few reasons, but you will be getting more bang for your buck for pulling for the child. Jiaoqiu is just really focused on one particular Nihility team, and they even mentioned it during the livestream. His best team is going to be centered around Acheron. Of course, he'll be slightly more universal than this, but that's where his primary gains and advantage will be. And to be honest, that's not really a bad thing. I still use that Nihility team to clear every single form of endgame content. In fact, it was by far my best team until I pulled E2S1 Firefly last patch. Almost without fail, I was pretty easily clearing most of the endgame content just with this Nihility team, and for the last few months, I don't think I've skipped a single session without them. The kicker is that Jiaoqiu makes this team even stronger. However, Yunli will be more universal. As a physical DPS that focuses on that really high damage from getting counters, her kit is much more in tune with pulling off these endgame modes. Additionally, there's a lot lower of a barrier of entry for running units with her compared to Jiaoqiu. Jiaoqiu's going to struggle a little bit more than Yunli in Pure Fiction, Memory of Chaos, and Apocalyptic Shadow. Really what this boils down to is just the more niche nature of his kit, especially being more focused around that Acheron kind of gameplay. But here's an important note. Both Yunli and Jiaoqiu are very good and can clear the content just fine. What we just discussed is primarily focused on a meta-analysis between the two characters in direct comparison. No matter what decision you end up making for who you want to pull, your account will totally be fine in the long run, and Honkai Star Rail does a very good job of this. They just don't release any bad characters, but there are some that are better than others. This is of course my current opinion on Yunli and Jiaoqiu. From a free-to-play standpoint, if you're only going to pull one, you definitely should be going for Yunli in the A side. And feel free to comment below any of your ideas, suggestions, or comments regarding anything we discussed. But every time I make one of these videos, I always have to put the most important message right now. Pull whoever you like. Honkai Star Rail and now of course Zenless Zone Zero are primarily focused on good team building aspects. All of the built-in systems and mechanics goes way deeper than any particular unit. That is what's so cool about these games. It rewards you for good team building. With this in mind, the most important thing is to have fun with whoever you're pulling. Go for whoever you enjoy the most, whoever's design you like the best, and things like that. My favorite character in this game is Blade. It took me 84 pulls to get him on the rerun, and even now he's still completely viable to do any of the content, and I so enjoy using him to clear it. But that's enough ranting from me. Just make sure you have fun playing the game, because ultimately that's what matters the most. Now let's just quickly review everything we talked about. We discussed both Yunli's counter physical damage focused kit and Jiaoqiu's fire damage, ashen roast focused damage boosting. Both are obviously insanely good and valuable in their own ways for the endgame. But Yunli does have the edge, both as a free-to-play player and universal-wise. Banner-wise, Yunli's character banner is more valuable than Jiaoqiu's, although his light cone banner seems to have some more value than Yunli's. But feel free to tell me what your decision is and who you're going to be pulling for in the comments below. That's all I pretty much have to say for the video, so like it if you enjoyed it or it helped in any way. I know I got a little rambly there for a bit, so let me know if there's any way I can improve these kinds of guides or shouju polls in the future videos, and subscribe to the channel for more Honkai Star Rail, Zenless Zone Zero, and other gacha content. In the meantime though, I will catch you in the next one. Remember, all it takes is one poll, and bye for now.